Today's mini lesson is all about ratios. Now, when we deal with ratios, there are two types of ratios. There's part-to-part ratios and part-to-whole ratio. Part-to-part is a smaller part being compared to another smaller part. And the part-to-whole is a smaller part being compared to the whole part. Now, sounds like a lot of parts. When we deal with ratio, there are three parts to a ratio. There's a small part, another smaller part, and then the total part. So think about boys to girls. If I have one boy and two girls, a part-to-part would be the one boy to two girls. So that ratio would be 1 to 2. Be boy to girl, 1 to 2. The part-to-whole would be asking for the total number, or the total number of students. Well, if I have one boy and two girls, how many total students do I have? 3. So a part-to-whole ratio would say, what is the number of boys to the total number of students? You'd have the one boy to the 3 total students. The part-to-whole would be 1 to 3. Now, keeping these two ratios in mind, let's look at a part-to-part ratio. A part-to-part ratio could say the filled bottles to the empty bottles. The number of filled bottles is 2, the number of empty bottles is 3. That ratio would be 2 to 3. Now, the part-to-whole ratio would say, what is the number of filled bottles to all the bottles? Well, how many total bottles do we have over here? 5. So filled to the total would be 2 to 5. Now, when we deal with ratios, there's two key things to remember. The first one being that when we deal with ratios, the order matters. So if it says filled first, we have to put that number first. If it says empty first, we got to put that number first. Let's say we're looking for filled bottles to empty bottles. Because it says filled bottles first, I got to count how many number of filled bottles do we have over here. That'd be 2. So the ratio of filled to empty would be 2 to 3. The other thing to remember is that ratios can be written or represented in 3 different ways. They can be separated by the word 2, they can be separated by a colon, and they can be separated by a fraction bar. So let's look at that ratio again. Filled bottles to empty bottles. So we have filled bottles, which is 2, empty bottles, which is 3. I can say 2 to 3. Or with a colon, 2 to 3, or 2 over 3. Those are the 3 ways to write a ratio of filled bottles to empty bottles. Okay, now, keeping these two key things in mind, we have a different problem up here. What is the ratio of filled bottles to empty bottles? Again, filled is said first, so I gotta count how many number of bottles up here are filled. It's just gonna be 1. How many are empty? 1, 2. Your ratio would be 1 to 2, or 1 to 2, 1 over 2. Those are the 3 ways to write it. Again, down here, what is the ratio of empty bottles to the total number of bottles? Now, this is a parts-to-whole ratio. So, how many number of empty bottles do we have? 2. How many total bottles do we have? 1, 2, 3. It would be 2 to 3, 2 to 3, or 2 over 3. Let's move on. Last but definitely not least, when we do fractions and ratios, we have to make sure that we simplify or reduce our numbers. So if I have 4 to 6, which you know by now can also be written as 4 over 6 or 4 to 6, we have to reduce this. And whenever I say reduce it, we just have to make these into equivalent fractions with smaller numbers. So 4 over 6 equals, let's think about it. What number goes into both 4 and 6? Whatever number that gives you, divide by that. Okay? Divide both the top and the bottom by whatever number is divisible into both the numerator and denominator. Okay, what number goes into both 4 and 6? You say 2. So you divide both the top and the bottom by 2, which gives you 4 divided by 2 is 2, 6 divided by 2 is 3, which means that 2/3 is equivalent to 4 over 6. Although 4 over 6 is a correct answer, it will never be an answer choice because it has to be in its simplest terms, which would be 2/3. Now, if that's confusing, let's represent this as a fraction bar. Okay? We have 4 over 6. There's 6 total parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we want to get it, see if it's equivalent to what over 3? We said 2 over 3. Now, if I want to make this 4, 6, I'm going to fill in 4 squares. If I want to make 2/3, I'm going to fill in the 2 out of the 3 total parts. You see how these are both equivalent. That means 4, 6 is the same thing as 2 over 3. It's just written in smaller terms. Let's move on. Ratios, instead of dividing, can also work in the opposite direction. So you want to figure out what goes in this invisible box right here. What do I do to 6 to get to 24? You would say multiply by 4. Whenever there's an equal sign, we're either going to be dividing or multiplying. You don't add and subtract when it's separated by an equal sign. So if you multiply 6 by 4, what you do to the bottom, you got to the top. 4 times 4 is 16 24. So that means 4 over 6 is also equivalent to 16 or 24. I'm not going to draw a fraction bar with 24 parts. Trust me on this one. Okay, why don't you try these on your own? Go ahead and pause this video. I'll get back to you in 1 second. Alright, hopefully you paused the video. Let's go over these real quick. Find out this middle section. Okay, we're given the bottom. So what do you do to 2 to get to 10? You would say multiply by 5. What you do to the bottom, do to the top. 1 times 5 is 5. Over here, we're missing this top piece. So, again, look for the middle. What do we do to 12 to get to 4? We're getting smaller, so instead of multiplying now, we're going to be dividing. So you divide by 3. So divide this one by 3. What divided by 3 is 3? You would tell me 9. Last but not least, this guy down here. What do you do to 5 to get to 15? You say multiply by 3. What you do to the top, do to the bottom. 8 times 3 is 24. These are all equivalent fractions, just with different numbers. Okay, now a ratio type problem could give you a chart. Whenever you're given a chart, the smartest thing to do is to tell me how many total numbers, or what's our total, what's our whole part of this problem. Okay, we have dogs, cats, fish, and lizards, but how many total animals do we have in this problem? To find that out, all we have to do is add them up. 3 plus 4 plus 1 plus 2 gives me 10. Now, A is asking, what is the ratio of dogs to cats? This is a part-to-part ratio because it's not asking for the total, it's just dogs to cats. You would tell me 3 to 4. Can I simplify that? No, there's not a number that goes in both 3 and 4, so your answer can just be 3 to 4 or 3 over 4. B, what is the ratio of lizards to all the animals? Okay, now this is a part to whole because it's asking for the total number of animals, which we know is 10, but lizards is listed first. So how many lizards do we have? 2. So it'd be 2 to 10. Now if you simplify this, what number goes into both 2 and 10? You tell me 2, divide them both by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So that ratio would be 1 to 5 or 1 over 5. And last but not least, what is the ratio of dogs and fish to the total? Again, this is part to whole. We're looking for the total in the end, but it's saying dogs and fish. So I'd want to add my dogs and fish together. Dogs and fish added together is 4, and you know that our total number of animals is 10. So we'd have 4 over 10. Can you reduce 4 over 10? Let's look at it. 4 over 10. What number goes into both 4 and 10? Again, that'd be 2. Divide both the top and the bottom by 2. We get 2 over 5. In the simplest terms, the ratio of dogs and fish to the total number of animals would be 2 over 5, or 2 to 5. Okay. An EOG type question would say, or ask you to take it one step further. It says, at this same rate, if there were 20 total animals at the pet store, how many dogs would there be? How many cats would there be? Well, we know that this total right now is 10. It's asking for 20. So you have to find the ratio first and then multiply that to get to 20. So first of all, our ratio right now, how many dogs are there to total? Well, we have 3 out of 10. So we have 3 dogs out of the total 10. It said if there were 20 total animals, how many dogs would there be? Well, we know that the total goes on bottom. So I put 3 over 10 equals something over 20. This is going to tell me how many dogs there would be if there were 20 total animals. Again, we're looking for this middle section. What do you do to 10 to get to 20? You multiply by 2. So what are you going to do to the top? Multiply by 2. 3 times 2 is 6. So this is saying if there were 20 total animals at the same rate, instead of 3, there would be 6 dogs. Let's look at the same thing for the cats. How many cats would there be? Well, right now we have 4 out of the total 10. So we have 4 out of 10. If there were 20 total animals, again, to get to 20 from 10, you multiply by 2, which means you multiply the top by 2, which 4 times 2 is 8. At this same rate, if there were 20 animals, that means there would be 8 cats. Okay, now this is the same type of problem, but it's not given to you in a chart. It's given you in a word problem. It says, if there are 20 students in the classroom and 12 are boys, what is the ratio of girls to boys in the class? This is what we're trying to get in the end. What is the ratio of girls to boys? Now ask yourself, does this problem directly tell you how many girls there are in this class? The answer is no. But it tells you how many total students there are and how many boys there are. Well, if you have 20 total students and 12 are boys, if 12 out of 20 are boys, 20 minus 12 is 8. That means there's got to be 8 out of 20 girls. Out of the 20 total students, there's got to be 8 girls. Now again, it's asking ratio of girls to boys. This represents our boys, this represents our girls. Now, the order matters. Going way back a couple slides ago, the order matters. It's saying girls to boys. So that girls has to come first. So that is my 8. 8 girls to 12 boys. Oh, my board's freaking out. We have 8 girls to 12 boys. That can be reduced. If I have 8 to 12, what number goes into both of those? 4. We divide the top and the bottom by 4. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 12 divided by 4 is 3. Your ratio would be 2 girls to 3 boys. Now, take it a step further. At this rate, how many boys would be in the class if the total number of students was 60? Well, right now we have 20 total students. So we can set this up again as a ratio. We have, right now, out of 20 students, we have 12 boys. We're looking for how many boys there would be at the same rate if there were 60. Well, how do we get from 20 to 60? You multiply by 3, which means what you do to the bottom, you do the top. 12 times 3 is 36. It's saying at the same rate, if it's 12 out of every 20 students are boys, that means out of 60 students, 36 would be boys. Let's look at this problem over here. How many total students would there be if class had 16 girls? Well, let's look at it. Right now we have 28 out of 20 students, right? 8 out of 20 students are girls. So if you say 8 out of 20 are girls at the same rate, how many total kids will there be if 16 are girls? So 16 would go on top because this is girls over total number of students. 8 to 16. What do I do to 8 to get to 16? You multiply by 2, which means what I do to the top, got to do to the bottom. 20 times 2 is 40. That means if there were 16 girls at the same rate, there were 16 girls in class, that means there would be 40 total students in this class. Okay, your turn to practice. Go ahead and pause it right here. I'll get back to you in 1 second. Alright, let's look at number 1. We're dealing with a chart, we're dealing with jerseys. Again, remember I said when we see a chart, let's count how many total we have. So I have 10 plus 5 plus 8 plus 2. What does that give me? 10 plus 5 plus 8 plus 2. That gives me 25 total jerseys. Okay? It says at the same rate, how many football jerseys would there be if the store had 100 more jerseys come in or 100 jerseys come in? Well, right now the ratio, we got to find football jerseys. Football jerseys, we have 8 out of the total 25. Out of the total 25 jerseys, 8 are football. Now we're saying if 100 come in and it's the same rate, we have to figure out how many would be football. Again, find this middle section. What do I do to 25 to get to 100? You multiply by 4, which means what I do to the bottom, got to the top. 8 times 4 is 32. At the same rate, if 100 jerseys come in, 32 will be football jerseys. And last one, if there are 12 students in a class and 7 are boys, how many girls will there be if the class had 48 students? Well, first we have to find out how many girls are in the class. If 7 out of 12 are boys, we say boys over total. If 7 are boys, 12 minus 7, that would mean there are 5 girls. 5 out of 12 students are girls. Now we're looking for 48 total students. We're looking for how many girls there would be. So I'm going to take this ratio. If there are 5 girls out of 12 students, we have 5 out of 12. The problem's saying how many girls would there be if the class had 48 students? Does that 48 go in my numerator or denominator? Well, because it's the total, it goes as the denominator. Now, last but not least, find your middle section. What do you do 12 to get to 48? You multiply by 4. So what I do to the bottom, you got to do the top. 5 times 4 is 20. And there you have it for today. That is your mini lesson on ratio.